All right, here we go. In this presentation, we're going to be going over how to optimize OBS for streaming worship services. But more importantly, I wanted to mention that pretty much everything we're going to go over will work with almost any live streaming software. Maybe not hardware, definitely software, OBS, vMix, Wirecast, XSplit. We're going to talk about a lot of fun stuff, and I got to give credit to John Roberts from Trinity United Church. He presented earlier today, and I wanted to expand upon just how amazing I think what he is doing. And how he has a whole guide that you guys can download at ptzoptics.com/worship-streaming. And we're going to put together all of it in the conference swag bag for the worship summit as well. So take a look at this. I'm going to put this full screen here. This is the way that John sets up his OBS, and it's just really incredible. You can see here that he has really just a small area for video preview. He's not using studio mode, and he's got just this big list of all of the different scenes that he's using in OBS. And I feel like I've never seen this before, so it really excited me just looking at this. He basically numbers each one and then puts the start time in before naming what it is. So you can see here he has number 0 at 10 a.m. They're not streaming yet, but they're testing the cameras for sound and audio and video. So just a really cool way for volunteers to come and look at OBS. We'll take a look at this. I have a whole thing set up here as well, that actual OBS that we'll go into. But I want to go over the presentation quickly. It's so cool. He's using different groups and folders to organize dynamic changes depending on what the pastor at his church wants to do. It just the whole way he set it up really blew my mind. We're also going to look at PTZ camera control being docked into your OBS browser. We're going to talk about how to connect your Zoom viewers. So if you have viewers in Zoom breakout sessions or Zoom in general, we'll talk about how to add those folks into your production, how to do canned worship services and hybrid worship services. And you can see this picture here. We have a live video preview and then a video capture of like a Zoom session. So that'll be interesting to take a look at. So again, thank you, John Roberts, especially for providing a 20-page outline of how, I think it's like a 25-page outline. It's crazy. So what are we going to learn today? We're going to learn how to remotely set up and manage OBS. This is something that also blew my mind. If you are able to, and this will work with vMix, Wirecast, or anything, if the assets that you're using, videos, hymns, text files, things of that nature, can be set up on a Dropbox or a Google Drive folder, you can update those from home. And by the time you get into church on a Sunday, all of that work is done for you. So we're going to go over how to simplify the entire setup process every Sunday by kind of just pre-thinking about what is you need and getting it all done. The next thing is we're going to just simplify the whole live streaming process for your volunteers. And this has to do with just organization of your scenes in OBS and the way that you name everything. And that's the same for vMix, Wirecast, and everywhere else. So it's a great example of how to do some organization and make it easier for volunteers who may change from week to week. We're going to talk about how to automate the PTZ camera movements so that you are able to quickly and easily move cameras. And I'll just show a quick example. I want to do examples throughout this. You can see here if we hit one button with a scene that the pastor's on the table, and then another button where he might be at the side of a table, and then on the lectern at the table, just with a click of a button, move cameras. It makes it so easy for a single PTZ camera to get a lot of different views in your church. And then again, make it easy for the volunteers to use it. We're going to create a countdown timer to display on top of videos on any scene. And that's good for, doing like a 10, 15-minute countdown timer in your OBS production that counts down to the start of a service. I mentioned using groups as well to do like scene alternates. So if you have one scene in particular, I think it's this one here. Wait, where are we? Which one am I looking for here? Was it my last one? that you can have these groups. Here it is here. So you could have, for example, this is a popular one. I want to zoom into this to show how important this one is. Essentially, you can have a a folder that organizes a bunch of different sources inside of OBS, and you can simply hide one or show the other. And this is really good if sometimes you do a recorded video, but other times you decide to do it live. So if it's live, there's a camera and maybe some text, maybe a copyright, different things like that. But if it's a video, you've got a video file playing and maybe, again, some text and different things that we're going to show how to pull directly from Dropbox and the Drive. We'll look at some best practices and then incorporating Zoom into OBS, vMix, or Wirecast. So we want to familiarize you with OBS and how to customize the layout to work for you. Organize all your scenes, group your sources together, lock your sources in place, use the Google Drive, use the camera presets inside of OBS to move PTZ cameras, set up hotkeys and include the hotkeys in the source text to make it easy for volunteers. And something that John is going to go a little bit more in depth on is the visibility timer, and I'll talk about the countdown timer. So here's just an example of just a regular virtual worship service where we have welcome and announcements, an opening prayer, presentation, maybe the sharing of a photograph, a prayer of confession, scriptures, a hymn, a meditation or a ceremony, a closing prayer, and an offer and thanks. So every church is different in the way they set this up, but each one of these we're going to talk about how to set it up and be dynamic and able to change. Now here's one, some of you may know Bill Tennyson, who is from the Raytown Church. He's been in the Worship Summit a couple times before, and he really liked the idea of bringing in the remote guests via Zoom and then sharing either a video or a live source in a small setting here. So I'm going to share with you guys this template that you can use and put your own logo on, and it has a countdown timer. It's a really cool little template. We're going to show you something like this, where you have a camera source, the Zoom session, and then a countdown timer that you can put to count down directly into your start of your service. So I'm going to share with you a lot of digital assets in the Worship Summit swag bag that you can use for this. But the first thing that's super important is organizing your scene names with the important information that your volunteers need to know about. So the first thing is the number. It's always good to have a numbering system, just giving everything order so everyone knows, okay, this is the order, and then the time. So we can stay on time. You can reference a clock and try to stay on time. Now, sometimes the pastor will talk longer than others. That's why generally the time after kind of the welcome part kind of becomes irrelevant, because we don't know exactly the time for when the reverend is going to be talking for a long time. But do your best to add the times when you can, and then a good amount of the name and what's included in that. So for example, is it a video or is it a live camera feed? Those are really good examples. And then down here, we'll talk a little bit later of, is it a live video? Well, where is the camera going to be pointed? And we'll look at how to control that. Now, I hope one of the things that, if you're not already doing this, you're understanding how to use the Google Drive and Dropbox. And essentially, you can have your computer at home sync with the computer at church. And I want to give you guys some ideas and thoughts of things that you can prepare before you ever even get to church. And one would be the date. So we're going to show a date text file. We're going to show a copyright text file. And these are just simple text files that are on. Any computer can make these, and you just save it, change it, and now all of that information we're going to pull into OBS. It's the same for vMix or Wirecast. You can reference that, and we can be prepared with the date, the prelude, the postlude, any copyright information, and the same goes for video files. So as long as you just organize the names of the video files, when you replace them for the next week, they can automatically be synced up and ready to go when you arrive on Sunday, cutting down your setup time significantly. Now, another thing that John Roberts showed me that I had never seen before, and I want to go over this, we looked at it a little bit, is these groups. So, how do groups work inside of OBS? Well, when you're inside of OBS, you can hit the plus button and you can hit group. And you can name the group, and you can see here for an existing, we can add an entire group if we'd like, if live. And so you can have an entire group that you can add to multiple different sources. I also want to mention that you can basically click the view button to show it quickly. And in a little bit, we'll actually talk about using hotkeys to toggle an entire group of sources on and off, which is nice for certain times. You can also lock your sources, and that's something I recommend doing for all of the sources. The lock button is something I think it gets overlooked a lot in OBS, but you can essentially lock things, and once they are locked, you cannot move them. They can't get bumped or moved. So if you're spending a lot of time on a scene that you're setting up in OBS, lock all the sources so you don't need to worry about them, getting messed up. Now, we already looked at this example, but I'll show it one more time. There is the him if live and the him if video. So just two simple groups allowing you to dynamically change a specific scene in OBS to fit, the changes that happen throughout worship services that you can come prepared for. Now, my next presentation slide is just explaining that, you standardize those names, and the naming conventions will allow you to replace those files that are on the two different locations. So we showed kind of using the different text files, and you can also, again, go over here to the example videos and just have them the exact same name. So when you replace that file, it automatically replaces it on your computer at church. Now, another thing I want to look at is scenes for camera presets. Now, this is a really powerful way for you to as you're walking through this, give your volunteers the ability to just click a scene and the camera moves. And how does this happen? Well, if we look closely at these scenes, we have the camera, and there's a couple other things we're going to look at, some images, but we'll save those for a moment. And we basically have a browser input. So this browser input has some somewhat important information here that allows the web browser source in OBS to tell the PTZ Optics camera to zoom into a specific position. So this is included in the documentation in the swag bag for the worship summits. You don't have to write this down, but essentially it's http:// the IP address of the camera, a string of code, and the preset that you'd like to use. So this is preset 3. And the only thing you have to remember to check is refresh browser when scene becomes active. Now, with that set up, I have 3 different browser sources. One is calling browser source 2. One is calling browser source 1. And in that way, you can set up 3 different browser sources. Now, the other thing I'd like to draw your attention to is the ability to dock a camera controller directly into OBS. There's a couple different ways to do this, but you can actually change the images inside of these areas here so that it makes it even easier. You can change the names and you can change all of that. So how does that work? Well, if we look at the view docs area in custom browser sources, we can see that this PTZ controller is a file on my computer. So we'll find that file and I'll just show it to you quickly. So this file is right here. And essentially, this is the PTZ Optics dockable camera controllers. And I'll just show you one of them. If we open the small camera controller, with, let's see, let's open that with, I want to open it with Google Chrome. It's not letting me do that. If I open the code of it, this is where we can make changes, but I didn't want to go too deep into the code. But this is basically this controller here, so we can change the information, the names, etc. there. But I was hoping I was going to be able to. I don't know why it's not allowing me. There's open with. Sometimes it opens, sometimes it doesn't. There we go. Okay. This is the actual controller right there. So this is just a smaller version. So I like to have a couple different ones, but this right here, this file, we can go ahead into the view docs and add a mini controller. Click OK, hit apply, and now we can actually drop that down directly into our OBS interface. So I apologize if that's a little confusing, but like we have this one's the medium size one, and this one here is the small one. So a lot of different ways to really customize the look and feel of OBS to fit how you want to use OBS. But what I found is studio mode is not really necessary for a lot of churches. While you can see here, studio mode gives you the option to see it, the video left and right before you transition to it. It seems like it's better to use the real estate for a long list of scenes and then have a few PTZ camera controllers inside of the OBS interface with a single screen as opposed to the dual studio mode. Now back to our presentation here because we have a lot to cover and I only have a little bit of time today with you guys. So going back to the presentation, we looked at the ability to have like a single sermon with 4 or 5 different camera preset spaces inside of OBS. So that's really powerful, and churches really seem to like that. Now, you can have an Xbox controller, a USB connected Xbox controller. Volunteers really seem to like that. You can use an IR remote, or you can use the free PTZ Optics software. But I think building it the camera control directly into the OBS interface is one of the best ways to do it. Now, John, this is a slide that you probably have seen from John, but you can use the IR remote to do some initial setup, and you can use the PTZ Optics camera app to control up to 8 cameras. But the next part of this that I really wanted to talk about was the hotkeys, and then we'll talk about connecting OBS and Zoom. Now, hotkeys are something that can become pretty valuable. And so I want to zoom into what we have set up here. I really thought it was a genius way to use these hotkeys, which was to put the hotkey name into the source name. So you can see Control Shift +1 will toggle this image on, and Control Shift +2 will toggle this one off. So it makes it easy for your volunteers if you do like showing images. You can just very simply toggle these on and off using hotkeys in OBS. That goes for anything: videos, pictures, literally any source. So where are those hotkeys? Well, if we go into settings and hotkeys, one of the things you'll notice, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit to make sure that this is nice and clear for you guys to see, is that every single scene has its own set of hotkeys. So the scene itself, you have the ability to switch to the scene with the hotkey, but basically show or hide any input or source inside of this scene. So just right off the bat, by organizing these scenes in this way, it makes it very easy to interact with the hotkeys. So very nice ability to do that. You can even set up hotkeys to mute things. So I wanted to mention that. Again, it's a mixture of making it easy for the volunteers and not adding too much, but at the same time having really good options for controlling and producing good stuff. So last thing here And I just want you guys to know on the Stream Geeks YouTube channel, I have a much more detailed video on how to connect OBS and Zoom the right way. But I just thought this would be valuable. If at any time you guys have technical questions, I'm going to let you guys on a little secret. This is pre-recorded, so I am in the chat right now. I am checking the Facebook user group and I'm trying to answer your technical questions. So don't worry, ask the technical questions, try this when you get to church on Sunday, and I'm happy to help and answer those questions in our user group on Facebook, but also right here in the YouTube and Facebook chat. So in general, whether you're using Zoom or BlueJeans or WebEx or Teams, now most people are using Zoom, you can capture it into vMix, Wirecast, OBS, XSplit, you name it, and live stream it to YouTube and Facebook. And this is a picture of me doing so. You can see OBS on the left, Zoom on the right, and you capture the video of Zoom into OBS using a desktop capture. That's the easy part. You send your video from OBS into Zoom with the new virtual camera button, which we'll look at in a moment. And then you have to deal with audio in and out. So you have to deal with a microphone input and a speaker output. But that's it. It's not too hard. It's a little complicated for a lot of people, but I'm going to walk you through it and answer your questions here. So quick picture, I just did a handwritten drawing here. Virtual webcam. Audio output is the speaker output of Zoom, and the audio input is the microphone. So let's go ahead and launch a brand new meeting inside of Zoom here, and I'm going to show you how to set everything up. So first of all, there's this Start Virtual Camera button. Now, there was, for a long time, people would use this virtual camera plugin, but that's no longer necessary now that OBS has built that right in. So as soon as I hit Start, everything in OBS basically goes out to Zoom. So if you want to have Zoom as a place for people to watch services and then go out into breakout rooms, it's a decent way to do that. There's a whole nother part of Zoom, which is security and understanding how to have a waiting room and breakout rooms and all of that. We've covered that in past videos. So if you have questions about that, we're happy to answer again. But so far, we've connected our video. Now, the next thing, the hardest thing, is really the audio. So that's what we're going to focus on today, is getting the audio in and out of Zoom, from OBS into Zoom. So let's go to the presentation to cover it from a high level, and then we'll go into actually doing it together as well. Now, I want to mention that if you're going to be using OBS with Zoom, you're going to want your pastor or anyone on camera to be able to hear the audio from Zoom. So they're going to probably need an in-ear monitor system like I use all the time for our live setups. So that is the in-ear audio system. You can see the speaker output of Zoom is going through my computer, and I usually wear a wireless in-ear audio system, and that is how it works. So the first step is to start your virtual camera and then bring it into Zoom. You will need to install something called Virtual Audio Cables A+B. Now, there is a Mac version of that. You'll have to refer to the video. I can't remember the Mac version of it right now, but there's virtual audio cables for Mac and PC. Your webcam inside of Zoom is going to be, let's just open this up a little bigger. It's going to be your OBS camera, right? And then you really need to worry about the A and B audio cables. So once they're installed, you might need to restart your computer just one time, and we need to set up two things. So in audio, we go to audio settings here, we can see, and I'll zoom into this to make it simple. You can see my microphone has cable A. You can see when I talk, there's audio coming in. Now, when we hit test speaker real quick, you guys can hear that. I can hear that. because we're bringing in cable B, which is the audio coming from Zoom. We're bringing that directly in to OBS. So that's how it works, and let's go ahead and do that. So I'm assuming you've installed the virtual audio cables A and B. You've set up your virtual camera inside of Zoom. You can just hit that Start Virtual Camera button. And now we're going to look at a plugin called OBS Audio Monitor plugin. This plugin makes everything so easy because it brings an audio monitor filter into OBS. So essentially, we can go into our, let's see here, here's some audio here. We can go into the audio filters, and in Audio Monitor, you can see you can choose this for any audio source, your microphone, videos, in fact, anything you want the folks in Zoom to hear. You need to go into this, add Audio Monitor, and select cable A as the audio. And now that that is playing, when we go into Zoom and we join audio, you can see the little bars going up there. So that is the audio going into Zoom. So just go through any source that you want to be able to bring that audio in, and go ahead to Audio Monitor and select cable A or whatever you're selecting as your microphone input and bring it in. Now for your pastor to hear the audio from Zoom along with everything else in OBS, what we're going to do is we're going to go into settings, we're going to go into audio, and we're going to choose any of these global audio devices. And let's just choose our desktop audio as cable B, just to make sure cable B is what we have selected as our speaker, right? So everything coming out of Zoom is going into cable B, and then we're bringing that cable B into OBS as a global audio source. Now, I hope that was helpful. Again, it's a lot, so there's going to be a specific video on that Zoom side of things that I think will help a lot. The other thing I wanted to mention quickly was this countdown timer. This is a very simple little countdown timer. I've got a couple different ones I'm planning to customize for you guys and give you away. You guys will it'll be part of the download. So this is just a video file with a filter on it for a color key. So if I get rid of that color key, you'll see, a big green box, and we just add a color key to it. Boom, for green, and that makes it transparent so we can put it over videos, etc. All right, I know that was a lot. I'm here to answer questions. We can rewatch this. I'm going to post the whole video later. It was almost a half hour, so I'm here in the chat. Let's talk about it, and we'll answer any questions that you guys have. See you soon.